So episode 2, chapter 4 of The First Soldier has officially landed, and this chapter deep dives into the psyche and trauma of Sephiroth, while also fleshing out the character of Angeal. It's a real doozy. So we're going to break that down in today's video. If any of that sounds cool to you, feel free to click the like button, subscribe, and let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Doing any one of those things really does support the channel a ton, and it's always greatly appreciated. So as always, we will be pulling our footage from Fozfaz, who's doing a phenomenal job archiving this entire game, so that way we can revisit these stories and events at much later dates. So again, I'll leave a link in the description down below to their channel in this video, so you guys can watch it in 4K and hear the phenomenal music that's coming out of Ever Crisis. They're doing an insane job with this game's soundtrack. And if you would like a recap to chapter 3, that'll be in the description down below as well. So when we last saw our party, Sephiroth was going through a trial hoping to get his hands on Masamune. However, those spirits deemed him unworthy. Now as the party is coming off of this battle, Sephiroth hears a very familiar voice echoing in the temple halls, and it ends up being Glenn, who shows up wearing a very Kingdom Hearts looking robe, and he says to Sephiroth, "I'm here with Matt and Lucia. We're looking for Rosen. He ran off deep into the cave. I need to find him." Now Angeal, Alyssa, and Bachmann, they don't know who Rosen is and what went down, so Sephiroth tells them the truth. Rosen was the last Redorian, alone on an island in charge of protecting it. Some really awful stuff went down, and Sephiroth ended up killing him. This then leads to a flashback where Glenn and the crew are talking about Rosen and how they don't like that this young kid is by himself on this island, and they feel the need to protect him and really look out for him. Sephiroth, however, is like, no, he's our enemy, and it's not a good idea to get close to your enemy. But Glenn, however, is like, look, you and Rosen are very similar, Sephiroth, whether you realize it or not, and I think you two would actually be really, really good friends. However, Sephiroth ain't having it, and he shoots down that idea. But we dive a little deeper into Sephiroth's mind here, and he realizes that this group of people with him are genuine friends. And that's different from what he's experienced in Shinra, where everyone was giving him special treatment and constantly showering him with praise. But no one ever tried to actually talk to him and get to know him. All they ever saw was just an illusion of a hero, which really bothered Sephiroth. And Sephiroth starts to realize that whenever the group talked about Rosen, it would make him super anxious. So it's almost like Sephiroth is trying to become more human, trying to fight back against that coding, that upbringing that Hojo and Shinra really instilled in him, of him being this unstoppable weapon, this being who was meant to be a hero. Now, as they come out of that flashback, Angeal realizes, wait, if Rosen is dead and you're no longer friends with Glenn, Matt, and Lucia, then how could they be here? This clearly is not right. To which Alyssa says, that's not for you to decide, that's for Sephiroth to decide. Now again, Alyssa has been super sus this entire journey, really kind of stroking the ego of Sephiroth, reinforcing some of his bad habits, even kind of manipulating him and planting ideas into his head. So she's kind of standing in the way of Angeal, who's trying so desperately to break through to Sephiroth and really just get him to open up. But Sephiroth is seemingly unbothered and just wants to continue to get the Masamune, so they push forward. As they move forward, Angeal reminds the party, we need to be careful. These spirits here are clearly trying to lead Sephiroth astray, which has been happening the entire time they've been in this temple. Bachmann, Alyssa, and Sephiroth seem to kind of fall to that temple's allure, with Angeal being the only one who is seemingly able to escape that allure. He then makes a plea to Sephiroth saying, look, it's very clear that you cared about Glenn, Matt, and Lucia, and even Rosen, and even if you deny it, you still have to process what happened between you guys. If you don't, all of this dark energy that's around us is gonna feed off of that and make you weaker. You gotta process this stuff, man. So Angeal is essentially like a therapist for Sephiroth right now, trying to appeal to the humanity and let him know, like, look, man, like, you made mistakes. We all do, but you got to acknowledge that. You can't cling to the past. You gotta be able to move forward. Of course, typical Sephiroth, he tells Angeal, this is my fight. Stay out of my way. I'm gonna go get my sword. However, Alyssa, again being the one who is able to appeal to Sephiroth and he seemingly doesn't fight back against, asks more about Glenn and the crew. And this is where Sephiroth opens up and he says that while everyone at Shinra again gave him that special treatment, Glenn and the group never did that. They just treated him like he was a normal kid. Which leads to another flashback again where Glenn and the crew are just trying to get Sephiroth to realize you and this Rosen kid are very similar. You're much more alike than you realize because you are both people who are putting your lives on the line to protect others. You are essentially heroes. And you in particular, Sephiroth, you're risking your life to do your job. Here we get some more inner dialogue from Sephiroth, which really kind of reinforces that imposter syndrome that he seems to be feeling, because he's saying to himself, I'm not a hero and I didn't choose this path that I'm currently on. Now Glenn is trying to fight back that imposter syndrome and let him know, like, look, no, you really are on a journey to become a genuine hero. You've got a real talent for it. You must get it from your parents, which is kind of ironic when you think about it, knowing that Hojo is actually his father. Sick. Now, internally, Sephiroth is irritated by Glenn and the crew, but he's also realizing that he's kind of happy because he's experiencing a normal friendship in a relationship, the one thing he's always wanted. Again, the thing we're learning a lot in this series is that Sephiroth just wants that normalcy. He wants a normal life. He wants a mom. He wants to go on picnics with his mom. He wants friends. He just wants to be a kid, and he's never had that. And I think he realizes deep down he probably never will. But he had hoped that him and Glenn and Matt and Lucia could become more than just allies. He wanted to be genuine friends with them. So knowing that they broke up really stings. And he essentially threw that all away when he killed Rosen. Now, Angeal asks more about Rosen, which leads into another flashback where Sephiroth has this moment of clarity where he realizes maybe it's actually good for me to meet this Rosen kid and actually be friends, but because he's so awkward and he's never met anyone his own age, he doesn't know how to approach a kid and actually be like, hey, do you want to be friends? Which leads Glenn, the himbo, to say, oh yeah, if you want to be friends, just take him to the Honeybee Inn. To which Sephiroth is like, what's the Honeybee Inn? So Matt and Lucia chastise him and we see the end of that flashback. But the whole point is that Sephiroth was trying to open up. He was becoming comfortable with Glenn and the crew, and he realized maybe I can actually become friends with this kid. Maybe it'd be a good thing. Now, Sephiroth then explains to Angeal, I saw how close they were getting to Rosen and how dangerous that was. So Angeal goes, oh, so you're saying you killed Rosen to protect Glenn and the crew. But Sephiroth says, no, I killed Rosen because he was an enemy worth my hatred. Angeal immediately senses that's BS, and he's like, no, you're not telling the truth. And we know that is not the truth. Flashing back to that moment between Sephiroth and Rosen, Sephiroth was pleading for Rosen to leave that island and go with them so he could save him. But Rosen didn't want it. He was the last of his people, and all he wanted was to be reunited with them, so he asked for that mercy killing. But again, because Sephiroth feels that imposter syndrome, he has that low self-esteem to a degree, he's trying to reinforce this thought process of, I'm just a weapon. I don't open up to people, I don't get close, I do my mission, and I move on. He's essentially lying to himself, and Angeal can pick up on that immediately, and he's like, dude, you're not telling us the truth. Like, who are you fooling? And he clearly is not going to give up on Sephiroth. He's been knocking down that Sephiroth door every chance he gets. Sephiroth puts up a new door, and Jill just kicks it in. He's a good dude. He's not going to give up on him. As the group pushes forward, they catch up again with Glenn, but he runs off, and Angeal reminds Sephiroth, look, again, you need to doubt everything you see and hear here because these are all illusions. And Sephiroth at this point has reached a breaking point, and he snaps at Angeal and yells at him like, who do you think you are? And Angeal opens up. He's like, I'm someone who cares a lot. I learned from my mom that I need to be true to myself, and I learned from my father that I need to cherish my dreams and my hope. I need to live and embrace them and move forward. Which is where that motto kind of comes from between Angeal and Zack, which then gets passed on to Cloud, the whole embrace your dreams speech that we hear quite often. And then being kind of cheeky with it, Angeal is like, you know, I have a bad habit of sticking my nose where it doesn't belong, so it's nice to meet you, Sephiroth, I'm Angeal. So again, they're really kind of fleshing out Angeal. He's not this like one-note cardboard cutout character. He's genuinely funny, he's got a personality. Again, he kind of reminds me of a more focused version of Zack. But again, Sephiroth being super stubborn is like, look dude, we were raised in two completely different worlds. We're never going to see eye to eye. And that's really the contrast between those characters. Sephiroth grew up in this cold, corporate setting with a mentor like Hojo who was constantly belittling him and berating him, probably abusing him verbally and manipulating him at a very young age. Angeal didn't have that. He had two parents that loved him, he loved them, he worked hard, he saw how hard they worked and what they sacrificed for him, for his dreams of becoming a soldier to come true. And it just kind of makes you wonder, what would Sephiroth have been like if he had a similar upbringing like Angeal? Now, eventually the group moves on forward and they come across something called the Umbral Void, which brings forth two illusions, one of Matt and one of Lucia, and both of these illusions are grabbed by demonic hands, they're raised in the air, and Hojo appears. Now he's taunting Sephiroth and he's like, look, you gotta pick who you want to save. And Sephiroth's like, what's the point? If this is an illusion, then this isn't gonna matter. But the Hojo spirit and these demonic entities, essentially, they want to know what Sephiroth's judgment is. Because if he shows any type of indecision, they're going to view that as a weakness, which is going to hurt his chances of getting that Masamune. So they're essentially like, show us your worth for this blade. Now, regardless of who gets chosen, Sephiroth ends up doing battle with an enemy called the Blighted Spirit, and Angeal is right by his side every step of the way, reinforcing all of the positive stuff for Sephiroth, letting him know that this umbral creature, this is a creation of you, Sephiroth. This is an illusion, and you need to fight back. They beat back this illusion, but then the illusion steps forward and says, you had a moment of doubt, Sephiroth. For a normal person, that's fine. But for you, you're special. You can't let that happen again. Because the more uncertainty that you show us, the more we view you as being weak. So the spirits are clearly being super twisted with Sephiroth and molding him into this colder killing machine, while Angeal is actively trying to help Sephiroth in a healthy way of processing the trauma and some of his past mistakes. And Angeal really urges to Sephiroth, like, look, no matter who or what you see, you need to block that out and you need to push forward, my dude. Because if you keep clinging to the past, it's only going to get in the way of your mission. So you really got to move on and let that go. Because clinging onto that is making Sephiroth weak, which is what those spirits are feeding off of. Now, the group decides to take a break here, and Bachmann, who is the cameraman documenting all of this stuff, again, he's putting together like this weird PR video for Shinra that's going to boost up not only the soldier program, but show the war hero Sephiroth, his journey to becoming that symbol that Shinra wants to prop up. He's realizing that this trial that Sephiroth is going through is really pushing him to his mental and physical limits. And the more that he seems to desire the Masamune, the harder these trials are becoming, which is going to make him weaker. However, in a very twisted, sick kind of way, he's grateful that Sephiroth is going through this, and he's grateful that he's experiencing it and watching Sephiroth get through this, because he feels that if he comes out on the other end, this is going to take Sephiroth to the next level, that thing, that weapon that Shinra wants him to be. So it's really kind of sick how everyone is viewing Sephiroth minus Angeal. Now, to end the chapter, we get some bonus dreams, starting off with Sephiroth, where he is going through a massive guilt trip with these illusions of Glenn, Matt, and Lucia, who are pointing at him, basically calling him a murderer and making him feel bad because of how much they cared about Rosen. So again, I think there's that jealousy there that Sephiroth might have felt of like, well, you guys are treating Rosen this way, what about me? Aren't we friends? But this is where things get nuts. Jenova shows up. Again, Sephiroth thinks that Jenova visually is Lucrezia, so she takes that form. But she shows up to defend her baby boy, and she is just reinforcing all of Sephiroth's doubts and those choices he made, saying like, look, you made the right choices, dude. You can do no wrong, my son. And then she utters the words, even if the world stands against you, I'll protect my Sephiroth, which then cues Sephiroth to cut down these illusions and embrace his mother. Jenova then saying, you can sleep forever if you wish. So again, these dreams, which seem to be manipulated by Jenova, are really trying to coddle Sephiroth and reinforce kind of the negative stuff. All of the healthy, positive talk from Angeal is essentially being washed away in these dreams. And it just reinforces how much Sephiroth, again, wants that normal life. He wants to be a kid, he wants his mama, He wants to eat some pumpkin soup, which is apparently his favorite soup. It's Sephiroth and his mom against the world, essentially. Now, after this, we switch to Angeal, who's having a dream, which is also a guilt trip. And this illusion, whatever this force is trying to bastardize the image of his father. His father being a hardworking, loving man. The illusion's like, no, actually, he was lazy, and he married Angeal's mom purely because of her connections with Shinra, and because she was going to be loaded, and it was going to take care of him, and he wouldn't have to do anything. This illusion of the father then blames Angeal for his own death, saying, this Buster Sword that I crafted for you, this sword that put our family in debt, this is what killed me. And by proxy, you, son, you are what killed me. Now, Angeal realizes that some of this is not true. He realized how much his parents loved him, how much they sacrificed for him to become a soldier, but he also acknowledges, yeah, there might be some truth there. His family really did go into debt crafting that Buster Sword. And Angeal himself may have been a bit selfish with that dream of joining Soldier and kind of putting that burden on his family, feeling the need of, we need to support our son in whatever his dreams are. And as this illusion of his father is about to strike him down with the Buster Sword, that's when Angeal comes to terms with, yeah, this might be truthful. There might be some truth here. And he's able to break free of that illusion. And he realizes if you just face yourself and you don't run away and you actually process this stuff and come to terms with, yeah, I might be to blame for some of these things in my life, that's what's going to break you free of a lot of these illusions. And he realizes, my parents loved me, dude. Like, yeah, this sword was expensive. They put a lot of money into it, but it's their proof. It's living proof of the love that his parents had for him. And this is very similar to how Angeal broke out of the last dream in the previous chapter. And it's almost as if the Buster Sword or even the spirit of his father, which might kind of, be hanging around, might be responsible for helping him break free of some of these illusions. And after that dream, Angeal is kind of renewed. He has a new sense of strength, and he realizes, I gotta be on my A game here if we're gonna survive this. So they decide to get up and push forward, which brings us to the end of the chapter. And I gotta say, I think so far this probably is my favorite of the chapters we've covered so far, because it really deep dives into Sephiroth's psyche, his trauma, what he's really experiencing, some of his doubts and insecurities, that imposter syndrome in particular, and how he really, again, just wants a normal life. He genuinely wants friends. He wants to be loved. He doesn't want special treatment. He just wants to be treated like a normal kid. And seeing that Angeal being, such a good person, seeing the good in Sephiroth, trying to get him to process things in a healthy way, to talk it out, to be open, and to not give up on him, I think is really great, because it really fleshes out, again, not just these two characters, but it fleshes out the backstory of their relationship. When we see them in Crisis Core, it's just like, oh, these two guys are friends. They've been friends for a while, but we don't really know the ins and outs of their relationship and what they've been through. And to see Sephiroth at a young age go down this dark path, but to have a beacon of light like Angeal who's trying to pull him onto a good path and reinforce healthy habits, I think is really, really interesting. But this story is doing such a wonderful job of really humanizing Sephiroth, adding, I feel like, the right proper amount of backstory, but also the appropriate kind of backstory, because a lot of us were worried like, oh, they're going to give backstory to Sephiroth. Like, the one thing you don't want to do with your villain is over explain them or take away, what makes them so mysterious. But I think that they're kind of fleshing this out very carefully, because they're finally giving us the inner workings of Sephiroth's mind, which we don't get a ton of in the OG FF7, and we haven't really gotten yet in the remake trilogy. He's still very mysterious in those games, and I assume in part 3 is when we'll have way more information from Sephiroth and about Sephiroth. But until then, I think they're doing an incredible job with Ever Crisis and really fleshing out who this character is, what he cares about, what he fears, and how this journey to get his iconic weapon is really kind of molding him. Maybe not for the best, but to have an Angeal there who's backing him up is nice. Now, I am very curious still about Alyssa. She ain't right, dude. She's been acting so sus this entire journey. The fact that she looks a lot like Lucrezia, which clearly has an effect on Sephiroth because he doesn't talk back to her. He tends to take everything that she says to heart. He's manipulated by her. Something is weird with Alyssa. So either she's Genova in disguise, Or maybe she was someone who was crafted in a lab specifically for the purpose of manipulating Sephiroth, because Hojo would do something super sick like that. He would make a clone of his own kid's wife, name her something different to mess with his kid. That is how sick Hojo is. He's a very demented, bad father. He's just a bad father.
Yes! Yes!
You're such a bad dad.
So I don't know when we will get the next chapter. Normally they do new chapters for Ever Crisis, The First Soldier, every other month. However, recently they skipped 2 months and then we got the next chapter. So I have no clue when the next episode will be, but I'm pretty sure they'll let us know on Twitter. With that being said, that's the video. That's the Chapter 4 recap. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Did you like this episode and how they deep dived into the psyche of Sephiroth? And what do you think is going on with these spirits, this dark energy? Do you think it's Genova or maybe something else at play? I am Curious Corduroy. I will see you guys in the next video. Please remember to always be excellent to one another.